Okay, hi everyone, welcome back. We are going through Acer's Green Booklet, section 1. This is question 30 to 35. So we've got two passages here. I think it would be worth taking the time to summarize them in the exam. So basically we have two opinions. We have the positivist and the interpretivist. I did not say this correctly, but it's very late and I've been talking for a very long time. Basically, the first passage says that these guys, they start with a theory or a hypothesis, they plan the investigation, they come to a statement, they assess the statement objectively, and that is the scientific method. That's what your normal scientist does. Whereas the other people, they become a part of the study, they imbue themselves in the study, which is in direct conflict because in the first one it's very detached. So that's basically the difference between the two. So question 30, according to passages 1 and 2, one major difference. That's your key words in the question. Major difference. There are a lot of differences between these two approaches, but we're looking for the major one. So don't get thrown off by a minor one. And then the question, so look for the major difference. Okay, so the answer is B, but I'll go through it why that is the case. So let's eliminate C and D first. So C sets out to examine social facts by intuition, whereas the other guy uses a methodological and logical approach. That's actually the opposite to what is happening, so that's wrong. D places high value on the detail of the subjective matter to be researched, whereas they have a more global view. No, that's wrong because both of the first one has a global view, not the second one. So that's also opposite. Just ignore that. That's meant to be opposite as well. Okay, A follows an informal methodology. No, he follows a very formal methodology called the scientific method. This methodology of theory / hypothesis, test, plan, come to a conclusion, then assess that conclusion using objective methods. That's a formal hypothesis, formal methodology. So that's wrong. And then B is predicts then tests a proposition where blah, 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 blah. Yep, predict then test. That is exactly what's been happening. I'm going to predict through my hypothesis, and then I'm going to test through my plans for investigation. So hopefully that was pretty clear. Question 31. According to the description, a social actor is a blah, blah, blah. So in the passage, it says the social, let me just find it, the social actors who reflect behavior typical of what is being studied. So they reflect typical behaviors. So that people, that will be set up and just reflect typical behaviors of what's being studied. That's pretty self-explanatory. So the answer is D. Okay, so A says researcher demonstrating findings by acting them out. That's wrong because he's not using a social actor to demonstrate findings. He's using a social actor to discover the findings. He doesn't know what the findings are yet. That's what the social actor is there to do. He's not demonstrating his findings. He's discovering them. So that's wrong. C. A model of what a researcher would like to find. We don't actually know that. We just know that the social actors are relevant to the thing that's being studied. But we don't know if the social actors are what researchers would like to find. And also just thinking about it from a scientific perspective, it would massively skew your study if you're sending people in there who act the way that you want to find. That wouldn't be in valid scientific study. So that's wrong as well. B. Person engaged to act out particular behaviours observed by a social researcher. No, because they're there to act out what is being studied, and it's not particularly clear from that answer. So again, this is an instance where we've got two answers, and D is the better of the two answers. If D wasn't there, then B would make sense. B is like 80% of the way there, but it's not as clear as D, because, as I just said, the actors are there to engage in what is being studied. They're not, which isn't specifically as clear as what B states, which is act out particular behaviours. So again, that's just an example of a good answer and a 80% answer, but D is pretty clear. Model distilled from a researcher's perceptions of several people with a particular trait. So that's just a more clearer version of B. I hope that made sense. Question 32. Research into women migrants' experiences of healthcare in Australia could be conducted by means of. The answer is C, which is either the two approaches are fine. And if you want to think about it this way, picture yourself as a researcher and say, if I was researching with this methodology about this topic, about healthcare in Australia, what would I do? Well, I would come up with a hypothesis. Can I come up with a hypothesis about this? Yes, I hypothesize that they have a bad experience. Can I test that? Yes, I can. Can I conclude? Yes, I can. If I was going to study it using this method, how would I do that? Well, maybe I would join the community. I would meet with a community of women migrants. I would get some social actors in there. Is that possible? Could I do that? Yes, I could. And that's why they're both okay. So if it's a question like this where you sort of have to extrapolate out and you're not sure, put yourself in the researcher's shoes and say, can I actually form an experiment to test this particular thing? Okay, question 33. According to the definitions provided in passages 1 and 2, which of the following descriptions of positivism conflicts directly? Conflicts directly. So this implies, a direct conflict, a main conflict, something that's very, very clear. There are a lot of things that conflict between these two approaches, but we want the one that is the most direct approach. So A is correct, which is should begin with a theory. And in passage 2, it says it is not pre-given. So that is a directly from the passage. B says rather than with value judgments. That doesn't conflict because passage 2 states reflect accurately, which implies, objectivity and accuracy and ration rather than value. It does slightly conflict though, like the whole, this is what I mean about when you have to pay attention to the word directly, because that does conflict slightly, but it's more a conflict of the whole approach or the whole passage, whereas we're talking here about a direct conflict between these two sentences, or the quote and passage 1. C, assessed by systematic observation. No, because that's what the social actors are for. We've got social actors in there. We're going to observe the social actors. That's systematic observation, so that's not really a conflict. It's not the same thing. Again, it could be a slight conflict because you can argue about systematic and the use of that terminology, but it's not a direct conflict. And then D aims to end up with general universal statements. No, we both can end up with universal statements, and even if it's not explicitly stated in passage 2, in order for it to conflict directly, we would need to say it will not end up with universal statements. So again, pay attention to that word directly. We're looking at the main things that conflict, because there's a lot that conflicts. We're looking at the biggest one, which is A. Question 34. Defining categories of social phenomena on the basis of particular observations is an aim of. The answer is C. It's an aim of both of the approaches. So basically the question is saying that we have observations. From the observations, we're going to define categories of social phenomena, and that categories is quite important. Yeah, hopefully it should be clear that both of them do this, but if not, I'll go through it. So I'll tell you why both of them do it. So the first strategy, we end up with universal statements, which universal statements which will categorize social phenomena. So that's how you can define categories. And then B, we have the ideal types, the social actors of ideal types. And so an ideal type is a category. You would have multiple ideal types, and all of them will be different categories which social phenomena can fit into. So yes, that word categories, you kind of needed to clue into that. Question 35. Again, see, these last few ones are quite easy. Basically, both approaches need to be unbiased. Obviously, the first approach is very clearly unbiased because it's the scientific method, even though there can be bias in the scientific method, but mainly it's unbiased. And the second approach, there is a direct quote in the passage which talks about how the social researcher has a great responsibility to reflect accurately through the ideal types, the concept being studied. So reflect accurately without bias. So that one's hopefully pretty clear. Okay, that is the end of that unit. That was questions 30 to 35. As always, comment down below if you have any questions, if something doesn't make sense. Yeah, I'm filming all of these in one go, so my voice is getting very dead at the moment. But yeah, so let me know if something doesn't make sense and you need further clarification. Also, check out the description for more resources and links for Gamsat and ways that you can get in contact with me directly. Happy to help you out. If you feel like you need an extra video on like anything to do with section 1 and 2, I'm pretty well versed in, so if you need some extra help there, just comment down below or message me asking for help and everything. I'm more than happy to help you. Okay, in the next video we will go over question 36 to 44. See you then.